So, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this special session. Today, we're going to be taking a look at car shaders. As with everything, the first thing that I will always do is gather some references. Let's try to get something a bit more from the real world, something like this, which is going to give away a lot of the behavior that we're going to be seeing in car paints. So, I think this one right here is a great example of what we're going to be looking at. And I'm just going to quickly break down car paint for you. So car paint is going to have multiple layers. The first layer is going to be that base layer, and we're just going to make that like orange, for example, to replicate this right here, and that's going to be the color paint. This color paint can be a ton of different finishes. For example, it could be metallic, or it could be just satin color, and those two are going to look very different. Metallic paints have a thing called pearls or flakes, we're going to call them. While these more satin paint and that those pearls, those flakes, they reflect lighting in a way that metals do. They're they're called metallic pearls. Let's do car paint. I mean pearls. You can also understand pearls as like the pearlescent or iridescent. Well, let's just do like. So this is great because it is a very exaggerated example of what's going on at a much more smaller scale here. Is these kind of flakes making the paint kind of like glitter a little bit. And we're going to try to replicate this effect. Again, if you scale this down a lot, you'll get a very similar effect to this, obviously blue versus orange. And then you also have the satin car paint, which, sorry, satin. Might be messing my words right there, but let's just do like, what could be the name of this? Let's just call it glossy car paint, maybe. Yeah. So your non-metallic car paint is a lot more of just, believe it or not, a very satin paint in the base. So it's kind of similar to this with a clear coat on top. That clear coat is our second layer, which we're going to do in these car paint shaders. So why is it important to make this distinction between satin, metallic, and clear coat? Because if you pay very, very close attention, we have two behaviors in this surface. The first behavior, which is again our base layer here, our color paint, whatever that is, metallic, non-metallic, is going to have a level of glossiness or roughness that is completely different from the clear coat, which is the one that achieves these glossy finish. So let me quickly make an example of that, and we're just going to start with defining the base paint, okay, and then within the shader we'll be worrying about the clear coat. So I think I'm going to be doing this sort of metallic paint, and I'm just going to be using Substance Painter here for today. What I did here for this sphere is because I want this car paint to be tileable. Okay, so what I did is, let's see if I can get my wireframe. I made a cube and I subdivided it. And by subdividing the cube, you can see the main lines of the cube. Okay, and then spherifying it a little bit with a spherify modifier. But by using the cube, we can kind of unwrap this sphere in a way that works quite nicely for our purpose of visualizing this in a nice curvy model, but also gets us or gives us the ability to export a tileable texture, which is what a lot of cars, like the one on the Rocket League examples, are going to be using, they're going to be using tileable textures. So we have actually the two finishes here. We have the metallic finish and the more non-metallic one. So we can do both. It's quite easy to change between one and the other. But I'm going to start with the metallic one because I think it's the more interesting. First, I'm going to set up my Substance Painter. Just let me check. Yeah, my audio is good. And in order to like do car paints and stuff like that, I'm going to try pretty much every material that I'm starting from scratch. I'm going to try to go ahead and create some sort of neutral lighting. The lighting that we have right now, as you can see, we have some oranges, some blues, and the lighting is kind of warm. But if we go for something like Studio Tomoko, everything is pretty gray and neutral, so I can focus more on getting the correct colors that I need. With regards to the environment alignment, I'm going to set this to camera so that every time that I move around, my lighting follows. So pretty much I can inspect my textures a lot better, but I can still control the rotation and so on. For a very heavy, like lightweight scene like this, where we're just gonna have like a couple layers and a ball, I'm just also gonna activate my shadows because they're a great way to visualize how your metallics and so on are going to be transitioning towards the darker areas. I'm gonna have average shadows, like in terms of computation. I don't. Again, it's a very light scene, so let's just use whatever we can. Then I'm not gonna do any post effects, but I am going to make sure that I'm using my ACES tone mapping function, which is going to make sure that um my color space matches. In this case, we're going to use Marmoset first to test the shader. So ACES is going to look very similar to ACES, or actually Marmoset includes ACES, so I can set the same tone mapper and make sure that like all my colors look the same both in Substance and Marmoset. If you guys are interested, like maybe on the second session next Friday, we can, if we don't have time today, that is, we can take a look at how to make that shader in Unreal Engine. That shouldn't be too complicated. Um, mm, mm, mm. I'm going to be working with a very noisy texture here, so I'm going to increase my anisotropic filtering, and I'm going to make sure that I have like sharper mip maps to be able to visualize again all that noise that I'm going to be creating. And then when it comes to the shader, this is what makes the most difference. So let me explain one thing here. If I have, let's say, let's actually create a material like, for example, this carbon fiber. Just take a look at that. If we start increasing the specular quality, that didn't make a big difference. I'm going to guess because we have kind of like a glossy material. But when we go for more matte, sort of where the roughness kind of needs to be a little more interesting, this makes a huge difference in how you're previewing your material. By default, I think this is set to low. So we're going to go somewhere from high to ultra, just because that's going to give us a lot more information about how our material is behaving right now. I think that's it. We don't have a AO right now. I know I'm not going to be using displacement, so I maybe can save up on that. And that's it. That's going to be my basic scene setup, unless I forgot about something. We do have, we should have a car paint shader here. I'm not interested in that because I'm going to be building. I'm not sure if that's even available anymore. It's called PBR coated. So I'm gonna guess that we have the 2 layers or the ability to do the double layers somehow, somewhere. Again, I'm not interested in that, so just gonna use the ASM metallic rough material. In terms of channels, base color, metallic roughness, normal height, I am not interested in ambient occlusion for the stylable texture, where I'm not gonna have any substantial height. And then yeah, nothing like this really. I don't I don't really care. So if there's any questions, I'm gonna need you to unmute yourselves. Maybe we can have somebody, Kaylin, maybe if somebody has any questions in the chat, they don't have a microphone available or they're a little shy, maybe you can find a good moment to interrupt me and ask those questions. Is that all right?
Okay.
Yeah,
No.
thank you. Cool. Um, right. I'm just gonna start by creating our base color. So I can just call this base. And if I start to look at this material, it's quite simple from a distance. We're going to have a fully metallic, kind of high roughness, no normal, no height for now. There will be, and I will explain in what capacity we're gonna have those two. Those not those two, but we're gonna have the normal channel to begin with, right? So how do we create the flaky effect? A lot of people will use roughness. I'm just going to add a fill layer into this layer to kind of keep everything as condensed as possible. So I'm just gonna add a fill here, and I'm gonna call these like flakes. A lot of people would add their flakes to roughness. So maybe we can use something like the flakes texture. Um, we should have these gradient flakes. And I guess by dialing this quite a bit and maybe using levels to control the roughness, we could get somewhat of an effect for this kind of flaky paint and whatnot. That's not how real flakes behave. If we were to look at the color paint and the layers on the color paint, each of those flakes is going to sit. This is obviously a very exaggerated example, but each of those flakes is going to sit in a slightly different angle from one another. So your color paint, your base color paint, is going to look a little bit more like that. A lot of different flakes angled at different directions. And then, of course, when we have a light ray, let's actually move this to the side. When we have a light ray hitting any of these flakes, then the bounce direction is going to be different from any of these, or for all of these, right? The bounce is going to be completely different. While as with roughness, if we were to keep this based on just roughness, what we're essentially doing is we're kind of saying, hey, does this pixel, let's make this pixel very rough. So does this pixel reflect light? No. So we're not going to reflect light. So instead of reflecting on every pixel with roughness, we are masking what pixels reflect light and which pixels don't. It's a lot more complicated than that, but I think this kind of explains the purpose of the technique that I'm going to use nicely. Kaylin?
Have you?
Yep.
Yeah. There was a question on if this is a normal map.
Yes,
Yes.
correct. We're going to do this with a normal map. These flakes, there is actually, let me bring this up. I have a breakdown for this shotgun here. All the way down, you'll find a reference to this filter here, which is the faceted normals filter. What this is going to do is it's going to take a grayscale and it's going to convert it to a normal map, essentially giving you a little bit more of an anisotropic effect, which is in very, like, this is again very dumbed down, essentially what we want for our surface, this anisotropic effect, changing the direction of the light. So if I, instead of taking this on my roughness, I take something on my normal map, like for example, the flakes normal map, that effect is a lot better. Now, obviously this is kind of a cheat code, so we should probably learn how to do a facet. You can just get the filter from Ben Redmond. I like to do it myself. Okay. I think I do have the filter made already. I call it, I think I called it bent or, hold on. Yeah, I mean, I do have, this is Ben's filter. I just didn't get it to work. Just gonna be fully honest with you.
I have yours if you want it.
I think I'm gonna probably show how I think this is mine. I think I'm gonna probably show how this is done. This is done using Designer. If you give me a moment while that opens. So the main idea is that we take an image input, which could be, which has to be a grayscale map, like for example, a white noise, and then that white noise gets converted into normal map colors. The thing is, this has a little bit of added complexity in which we can take this in the red and green channel. Actually, why don't we keep this as simple as possible? And because I rarely get this filter to work, but I did get it to work today. So I think I'm going to settle with that and remain, like, keep this complexity as low as possible. Let me go let me go over how this worked. So what I'm going to do is on this base material, I'm going to add a fill, and then I'm going to drag and drop this BR facet into the normal of this fill. And then using this white noise as the input, that just worked. Now again, that's not the rule for me, but this time it works, so I'm going to use that to my advantage. You have the files on the project download, which are the same files that I just dragged and dropped here, and I think I imported this as a material or a filter. Now you're probably gonna have to experiment a bit with that. Now, our roughness can be very, very low, but as you can see, we still have this surface information, this surface detail. And what this is doing is essentially, as you can see, creating this anisotropic effect. It's changing the direction of these normals. This needs to be calibrated. Now, why does this need to be calibrated? Because we're messing with the normals. When we're messing with the normals, one of the things that can happen is if we have any baked information, any edges, any details baked onto our normal map, they can be destroyed by this. The way I calibrate this is by getting a light like this one here, and I'm going to make sure that the way this distorts is pretty much symmetrical all around. So in this case, we're getting this sort of diagonal here, starting from the center. But if I were to break this, kind of on purpose, this is working really well, like this filter. But sometimes something that happens is that your your specular kind of moves to a direction. If that were to happen, what I do is play with the blue red intensity until I have kind of brought the specular back to the center of the image, like it should be right there. But in this case, this one's working really, really well, so I'm not going to even play with it too much. I'm interested to understand if that's gonna work so well with every texture. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that's happening right there, for example. If I use a different texture that is a little bit more irregular, then that specular really moves. So then what I have to do is kind of play around a little bit to make sure, let's put these back to 0. Make sure that this specular kind of goes back in its place. Now, there is, yeah, it's what you're essentially doing is you're removing you're removing the effect, so you must be careful when you're doing that. But I guess I've just discovered that the true secret to this is to use a uniform grayscale. But yeah, you see that happens a lot. So that really moves. So you really want to make sure that that is as close to the center as possible. Maybe even by adding levels to these normals on the different channels and playing. Actually, we can do this within the same normal map. Sorry, with the same levels. And playing a little bit to make sure that those kind of remain, sorry, in the right position. Kind of like that. It even changes colors. I think it's because I kept my base color on here. Anyways, quite close. We would like it to be closer, much closer. Because again, every small imperfection in the normal map is going to create seams in your bakes. And of course, you do not want that. So, but anyways, again, this was working fine with our white noise, which is what we're interested in. Yeah, very uniformly distorting everything. Right. So for this car paint, we want medium roughness, maybe something like that. And we want these normals to be not too strong, but definitely noticeable. I'm just going to go into my normal channel here and play with the opacity of this fill. And I think for now, that's something I can work with. If you want to create even more interest, something that I can advise is that you get a little bit more tiling going on here. I'm just gonna increase this to 2K. Probably I had enough tiling, it was just a little bit blurred by the lower resolution map. And then you can play a little bit with blur slope. Let's go into the normal channel. Or actually, let's take a look at the end result just at 100% opacity. So I'm just gonna use the blur slope into my normal channel. And we can probably play a little bit with the intensity. And what that's going to do is it's going to change. If we put it on min or max, it's just going to change some of the grains, not all of them. So what we get is maybe 100 is too little intensity. What we get is a little bit of more variation within the grain structure that we have right here. So it makes some bits a little bit bigger and more noticeable, essentially creating, again, a bit of extra variation. I'm just going to have this maybe at like 60%. Cool. And probably it would be fine to have just a tiny bit of this white noise also in the roughness. Let's just activate roughness too, and let's get the white noise. Where's the roughness? There it is. Cool. And on my roughness layer, I'm just gonna get this down to like, yeah, 2%. No, that's too little. Like, I want it to be the least noticeable thing. Right. So it's just an extra pretty much on the edges. Nice. I think we could also introduce a tiny amount of color variation this way. So I'm just also going to add this to the base color, white noise. That's going to look a little crazy, but I'm going to be adding a filter, gradient, and maybe 2-3 colors are fine. Let's start with what we want. Like, what this gradient filter is going to do is it's going to color the grayscale. So if we go into the base color here, whatever is at position 0 will affect The blacks, 0.5 will affect medium grays, 1 will affect whites. So if I make this red, you can see everything that was previously white is now red. So I'm just going to have this to color pick from my reference, and maybe for the darker areas, maybe I can take something like that, but I don't, again, I don't want a lot of contrast here. Let's get this with the blur slope of affecting these two. Then base color, and I'm just gonna tone this down because, hold on, not the blur slope, but the gradient fill combo. Because I don't want this to be too contrasty either. So maybe 20%. And then I think like the combination of all of these channels is making the effect a lot stronger than I wanted it to be. Okay. Instead of playing with opacity on the fill itself, I could add another fill layer that has like all the main channels. So I could switch sort of the order of things and just kind of like mask rather than letting this show through or removing some of that effect. I think the roughness effect is super strong, so I'll leave it at 5%. And I think that's pretty good metallic paint right now. Cool. I'm going to export this. Let's create a template, or maybe I have already one. Let's see. I have a lot of custom ones. I think I'm going to use my Unreal Engine custom. All right, normal map and height. Yeah, I think this one's good. But maybe for demonstration purposes, I'll just do one where I have all my channels. Probably PBR metallic roughness, but just the naming is super bothering me. So I'll just create one very quickly. So we'll do maps export, and I'm going to have base color, metallic roughness, ambient occlusion, normal map, and I think I'm not forgetting anything. And now I'm going to be using the dollar sign, so I just want this to be the texture set. So T for texture underscore texture set underscore base color. This is going to be my base color. This is going to be my roughness, metallic, ambient occlusion, and then normal map. I'm going to have my normal map at 16 bits. The rest are good at 8. And then I'll get my mixed ambient occlusion into the ambient occlusion. I'm going to go to Marmoset, so I'll do DirectX in just in case we'll send this to Unreal later. And then metallic, let's see, roughness and base color. Cool. So let's export this as maps export, and I'm just going to do this on my downloads. I'll be using this model to showcase later. But for now, I think this is let's just use this sphere for now. Let's do car paint. And I got that model. I'll show the credits and all in a bit when I actually open the car. So we'll do 2K, that's fine. Output X template like dictates everything. This is called now default material. So we want to call this car paint underscore base. And now we should have car paint base. Yeah, all of these exported into our final place. Let me get Marmoset open. So I'm just gonna get this ball. Let me take a quick look at the wireframe to see how I want to angle it here. There we go. And let's just get the maps. I'm going to try to get Marmoset to be as normal as possible because obviously it probably has some of the custom um like arrangements that I use. Let's get textures, car paint, and let's just plug stuff in. Normal map. We're gonna flip Y here. Roughness, and I mean ambient occlusion. I'm not gonna use metallic. All right. Kind of have the feeling that there isn't much going on here right now. It is very, very tiled. But let's first, before moving on with anything, let's set Marmoset to be the same way as Substance Painter. So I'm going to use my Aces Tone Mapper, and I'm also going to get my sky, and I'm going to load an image. Just a little trick, if you want Studio Tomoko, you can go into your program files, Adobe, you can open Painter, but I normally grab it from Designer, Resources, View 3D, Maps, and then Tomoko Studio should be right there. So now we have a very similar view to what we're seeing in Marmoset. I will grab a light, probably the main light. Not sure which one that is. I think it's this one, just to make sure that I also have some shadows. Let's make the diameter up. I don't think I'm having too many shadows. Let's get something interesting going on. And that is not very interesting. It's difficult for me to create like good lighting with very rough surfaces, especially when I'm kind of expecting to have um, a lot more detail here. So I think I'm going to create this detail first, and I will um, then I will do the lighting setup for you all to see. So just very simply, we have our base. Now I'm going to create my clear coat. I'm just going to change the name here. So CC for clear coat. I'm going to create something with a where I'm just going to focus on the roughness. So it should look a little bit like this, but this is going to be super boring. So why would we even want this to be so boring? Obviously, we want this to be non-metallic because this is kind of like a plastic, right? So we don't want this plastic to be metallic, right? So this should all be set to replace because right now we can see all this grain right from the base. I mean, I could just hide the base. We don't need to mess with anything. So I'm gonna call this clear coat, and I think I'm just going to get some surface imperfection. I love this pack. It's called Surface Imperfections. You can find it at surfaceimperfections.com. Not sponsored or anything. It's just like something that I use a lot, like a lot, a lot. Probably my main source for like grunge maps and so on. It isn't like a huge collection or anything, but it's really that good. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start playing. I think I'm going to group this, and I'm going to start playing with fill layers. Now I could do it the same way that I'm doing my base with a fill and then working my way with layers, but the problem with these surface imperfections is that they don't have any sort of contrast controls. Like, for example, any of your usual, let's use this anisotropic, right? This has balance, contrast. We don't have any of that. So I have to create that on my own. The way that I'm going to do that is just by adding layers that I can add levels to. So we're going to have like some smudges. I'll just call it smudges, but I don't really know what I want here yet. So I'm just going to go into textures and surface imperfections, and I'll grab something that looks fine on a car. So this has kind of like this dusty look, which is kind of cool. I'm going to add some levels because I want to remove this type of clothy pattern that I can see happening right there. Like these should be, these should tile. Let's get these to the to only affect the roughness. There we go. Like we should have now our hairs. This should tile again. So I'm just gonna do like dust. I'm gonna duplicate. Let's do the smudges now. Maybe we can do this with smudges, fingerprints. Okay. I think it would be clever. Let's see. I think it would be good and if you pay attention to smudges in like for example your phone, they're behaving very similarly to the way the car paint is. The same way that I was explaining, it kind of creates like a little bit of a different surface to reflect the light, but it doesn't really change the glossiness of the surface. So these smudges we could also we could and we should actually probably do another. Can I just do this directly into the normal map? This BR facet thingy. BR facet. I mean, you should be able to. Yeah, it's working nicely. And probably we can play with the normal map of it just a bit. As you can see, it really is messing with the direction. So I definitely want to calibrate this. Look at the seams that it's creating, right? With no normal maps, the seams are they're visible because I'm not sure why these aren't tileable or not tiling. They should be tileable. Maybe some of them aren't. I don't know. But that gets super accentuated when we activate the normal maps. If we calibrate the normal maps correctly, that effect should get toned down by a lot. So the movement isn't too crazy right now. It's just moving the specular up a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add levels to the normals. And I'm just going to try, let's see if can I move them like all at once. I mean, kind of close. Maybe I can fine tune now. So just needs to be down like that tiny bit maybe. Okay, that should be enough. Now pay attention to the seam without and with. So as I was saying, the seam really gets um, toned down quite substantially. Okay, so it's important to calibrate these smudges. And that's only at like 20%. You can really get very messy results. But it's definite it's well calibrated. So let's get this to deform the surface a bit, maybe 15%. And maybe dust should be over the smudges. We'll do that in a bit. When it comes to roughness, how much of these do I want really on my car paint? Maybe not too much. Something like maybe yeah, like 50, 40, 45%. I always go a little further than I think I need because like this sort of exaggeration is necessary when you zoom out because we're looking at this in a ball. When we look at this at the car, a lot of these details they're probably going to be gone. We want to make sure that these are just a tiny bit exaggerated. And so we have good clear coat here. Let's bring the dust in. Um, so in the roughness, probably if I look at the grayscale map, it's just gonna tell me this is the type of detail that just needs to be added on top of what I have because it's purely black and white. There's no almost no grayscale. And then I think I'll play a little bit with the opacity so we get kind of like a little bit more of an interesting surface here. And I'm gonna do a third detail which is gonna be like a fine layer of scratches. So let's do scratches. And for now I'm just going to hide this. I'm just gonna start from the roughness. And let's see what we have here. Yeah, so I just want this surface to be like a little bit mistreated. There's a lot of scratches in this pack that looks super nice. I think this one's very accurate for some sort of like car paint. I think I like this one very much, and I'm just going to play with the roughness a bit. Let's get the dust out for a moment. And here I could just like fine tune the look of the surface. If I have a very new car, then this is going to be like quite toned down. It's always going to be there. Like those scratches are always going to be there. Um, if we look at, like, for example, I was taking a look at this the other day.
Today we're going to take sandpaper to the side of my car in hopes of restoring some of the
Right,
worst
hopefully I
condition
can
paint.
mute it. There we go. And like the guy's doing a really good job at polishing, right? You can see it's very nice and polished, but still you can, when he gets close to the surface, you can still appreciate, you can still see a lot of the like the scratches that are left behind, right? That's supposed to be the after. Yeah, and there's still a lot of detail in that surface. It is definitely clean, but we can see a lot of micro scratches, dust, etc. Even little bumps, but obviously you can't just fix them with sandpaper. So we're gonna try to again fine tune that to our liking. And I think I like that. And I want to make sure that this gets added to the smudges that I have, so I'm going to get my roughness on linear dodge add. So now we have those kind of smudges plus a little bit of smudging. Probably now I will want to tone down the smudges, maybe something like 35. And the scratches, I think we're going to keep them at like 50%. And then we can bring back the dust. And I think that should be quite an interesting sort of car paint surface, like top layer. Now, I'm not sure if Marmoset supports this. We have reflection, microsurface, reflectivity. I think we can probably like there's an effect with car paint that's called orange peel, and that's just the way the paint dries. I think like if I would have to use my brain and logic, what would happen is when this is liquid, it has like a larger surface area, and when it starts to dry, I think the paint kind of compresses down and it kind of creates these sort of bumps, kind of like waves, very very small waves, and that sort of, I think, what's the name, pa, 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 pa. This kind of distortion to the reflection can be really cool. Now, how we get that done depends on what options we have in the shader. So we don't have, I don't think we have clear coat normal maps, but we do have detail normals, which is an added layer of normal map. So we could probably create a third map just for the orange peel effect. But for now, let's get this out of substance. Okay. Oh, and that's a good question, because if we don't have normal maps, then we don't have, yeah, if we don't have normal maps, then we also don't have facet normals or anisotropy on the clear coat. So probably some of these steps were unnecessary, meaning the normal map on the smudges. But we'll figure it out. Maybe Unreal gives me a little bit more flexibility. So in order to activate clear coat in Marmoset, I'm just going to go all the way down in the shader, and I should have clear coat, reflection, microsurface, and reflectivity. I am going to set my reflection to GGX, reflection, microsurface, sorry, to roughness, and reflectivity, it's currently set to specular, which is fine because this kind of gives me a nice amount of control over how much of that clear coat is visible. So if I do this, then a lot of the clear coat is visible to the point where it becomes kind of like a mirror. But with the intensity down, you can start to see kind of like this car paint effect already. There's a really cool effect with clear coats, which is Newton rings. I love it. What this is going to do is kind of like create this sort of almost like bubble effect. Pretty cool effect. But this time we're just gonna go for GGX. I'm curious about anisotropic. It calls for a direction map, but alright. Let's leave it at GGX, although that looked quite nice. Let me quickly just get a direction map, maybe from the normal map here. Right, so that might be the way to implement. I just learned this right now. I'm just gonna go to the comfort zone, which is normal GGX. I'm gonna get my roughness map here for the clear coat. And yeah, really that's all that I needed. My roughness. But I am going to experiment with this anisotropy because this looks very cool. Maybe even I can check some documentation. So what is this asking for? So a grayscale map. Okay. I'm still gonna use my normal map because, you know, maybe, I mean, it's cool. It kind of gives that effect that I'm looking for. Let's just tone it down a bit. Let's not go insane. But yeah, as you can see, we get a very interesting material. Now let's get that orange peel effect. That should be also quite easy. And by the way, if you're not exporting certain maps, like for example here, we're not exporting metallic, not ambient occlusion, no base color either. We're just doing roughness and normal map, which probably we could do something else for. But just roughness and normal map. So you can disable those textures and just export those. Now the thing is that I want to do that because this folder can get very large very quick. But all right, now let's get this only the normal map. So let's get this orange peel. I'm gonna do a similar thing. Just get this good base that I can see what I'm doing with. Probably white noise for the win this time on the height. White. And we're gonna get a very noisy surface as expected. We can go ahead and start blurring this surface. And I would like to see some references for this. It looks very similar to what I'm doing. Just this noise. I think this image is the this image is the best. And this has to be a very subtle effect, or else we're gonna ruin everything that's below it. But you know, seeing it exaggerated is great. So let's probably go with something like that. Maybe on a much higher scale, something like 5 tiling. And of course now we need to control the blur. And maybe I can make it a tiny bit more interesting if I go ahead and do something like a filter clamp. Oh, just on the height. And I can maybe, let's see, flatten it out a bit. Just like that. Now what I'll do on the height is I'm going to tone down the opacity of this clamp so that it gives me that effect, but yeah, it makes it a lot more interesting. So it gives me that effect, but it's not so strong. Clamping will kind of cut the tops. So it's kind of like if I'm sanding over it, essentially. It's going to cut the tops. And I wanted to do that, but not so strong. So just maybe, again, maybe something like that, maybe like 50%. And I'm going to export just the normal maps for this. I'm going to call this OP for orange peel or whatever. Naming is not super important because this is just an example. And I just want to get the normal map out. I don't know if this will work. Hopefully it does. The good thing about this is that Marmoset gives me both the option to add the detail normal itself with tiling and offset, but also weight, which is pretty much intensity. So if I get this in there, I can start to see some of the seams. I'm not sure if that's because my sphere is poorly made or the texture isn't tiling. We're gonna have to check that on the final model. But I can like bring the weight of this down quite a bit and still get that nice effect. I got this model from Lion Sharp Studios. Karol Miklas, I think, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is one of my favorite vehicle artists. If you ever want to understand vehicles, this is him. Like you have to study this person's work. One of my favorite cars ever, I always show it, is like this. I think it's a Fiat. You go into the seller spotlight. Like this car is just insanely good, and it's also game ready. Everything's
That
symmetrical.
looks insane.
Yeah, it's really good. It's breaking the symmetry only where it needs to, like for example here, windshield, but everything else is perfectly symmetrical. Again, breaking the symmetry only where it matters, but then everything else fully symmetrical. So one of my favorite, if not my favorite vehicle artist. So I got this model from him. Hopefully it's prepared, but like the good thing about this is that it's got like a lot of objects, so that's great. Sometimes when these models get uploaded to Sketchfab, in order to get the clear coat effect, what these artists will do, and what you have to do, again, if you don't have this um, clear coat shading model, is you will have to duplicate your mesh and push it just enough. So as you will see here, the wireframe is doubled. That's the base coat and the clear coat. And that's what you have to do if you want to sometimes, right? So if you want to achieve this without the shader supporting this. So you have this darker stuff, and then I'm gonna get this light here, and I'm gonna use it to light the background. So I'm duplicating that. I'm gonna use this light too. Again, whoa, that is some trippy angles. Can I recover this even? What is going on? Okay, let's try using whoa, the light selector here. There we go. So now I'm going to use that to light that section there, probably as a sphere, not a rectangle. Bigger diameter, bigger brightness. Let's go back to just this main camera. And I would also like to make this a bit more interesting as as a material. So let's make a golden car. I mean, it's a good shader. It's made Right. It looks like it needs to look. If I make this red, it's gonna look like a red car. Because at the end of the day, like, what are we trying? Like, what is this shader? This car paint is just checking certain boxes, which we defined at the very beginning, is to have this color paint and the clear coat and make them as interesting as we can. So maybe now tiling this even a little less. The problem is the shot now doesn't let me see a lot. So I think I'm gonna go a little TikTok here, and I'm gonna go into my renderer, and I'll turn this around. Um, or maybe just make it square, 1080 by 1080, and let's get a nice shot here of, like, I don't know, like an interesting area. I don't know. That's styling too little. Yeah, that shader is nice and interesting. Just needs the roughness to be controlled a bit, but other than that, whoa. I guess I'm a little stuck here now with direction in terms of like how to get like not how to get the render, but what could look nice. I mean, and make sense within the context of the class. But that is behaving really nicely. Probably my normal map needs a little bit more strength. And that is a little tough to control in Marmoset. Not to say it's just impossible to control in Marmoset. So this forces me to go back to Substance Painter. So let's open that on the background for a bit. And then it's just, I think it's just a matter of toning it, like up or down. I kind of feel like cream color today. How about black or white? How are those behaving? I mean, yeah, sure, white is gonna be that, but dark, wow, that looks really cool. I think I could improve a little bit of the like how much of the paint is showing with the lights by increasing the width of like maybe the backlight. So having like a thin line and a thick line. But also I think these need to be much longer just to like cover the entire length of the car. Something like that. I really think this is way too overdone. Oh, it's the anisotropy, right? No, it's the roughness. So there's no real good way to yeah, there doesn't seem to be like a really good way to control the scratches part. Well, I guess that does it. Yeah, like this is such a combination of like too many things that I feel like there's a lot of good right answers. So it's I guess the hardness of choice. Like you have this choice to do so many different things. It just gets a little difficult in my opinion. I guess we can play a bit with Fresnel here. Maybe make it 10 times as strong. And yeah, I don't think black will work because that's already embedded into the material itself. Ooh. Yeah, it's funny because some of these need like a lot more of that like car paint effect. Some of them like don't need any. I guess that's something that can be controlled with tiling. Like if we make it more tile, then it's more of a subtle effect. But anyways, I think that should do it.
Really cool.
Thank you, thank you. I feel like probably I'm not sure. Maybe the last half an hour felt a little strange. But yeah, just just doing the like what I always do, which is try to play with things, see if like I can get something a little bit more interesting than what I had. It usually it's difficult because at the beginning, like if you plan things well, it's very straightforward. When you know what you're doing, it's just like you go ahead, you do it. Um, yeah, which I think is kind of what happened here. Very straightforward from the beginning. We got what we needed, probably, and that's that. And now just seeing it in action, I feel like yeah, well, that's the material. Not much else to do, right? But it's behaving super nicely. I really like it. I could keep playing with this a lot. Ah, which reminds me, yeah, like I was saying, right? Like how do we get the different colors? We can do advanced metalness, I think, and no, it doesn't support that. So we can just go ahead and set this to specular. Wow. Wow. Look at that. Like it gives it to you, right? And if you make the specular intensity high enough, then what you will get is a metallic car. And if you make the specular intensity whatever the color is for your car or the color you want for your car, you kind of get, let's say, let's do that right. You get your metallic car. Like, I'm just gonna do this without ray tracing, okay? So that I can move a bit faster. So you get that with your specular. So if you want to get like cool effects, so for example, I want this to be like a green car with, let's make it a green car with some sort of like bluish specular. So I can go ahead and do that. So if you can get these sort of like Need for Speed effects. I'm not sure if you guys remember playing with that. I mean, maybe
Absolutely.
yeah. I think it was Most Wanted. Like, yeah, I don't even know how to Google that. But yeah, you could tune your cars. You could play with the iridescence of the paint. If I remember correctly, if you match the color to your specular color, then you're getting a metallic car, kind of like this, a little darker on the base color, just to get that sort of like metallic darkness, and then you just have that, and it looks a lot more. I guess, I mean, you can tone it down for sure. It you just have this sort of room to play a lot with whatever effect you want to achieve. So, like for example, that sort of like golden from like green gold color, that looks really good. Right now we have a lot of like the light doing like controlling a lot of the transitions between the colors, because obviously that's the reflection that is going to show the specular. But like you can get all types of crazy effects. Some of them work, some of them don't. Like for example, these I don't know, that could be Joker's card or something. But yeah, there's a chance for really cool effects with specular instead of roughness. Sorry, specular instead of metallic, because it gives you that extra layer of control for like crazy effects. The same way that it gives you like that control can play against you, because if you don't know how to control it, then you'll get incorrect PBR values, which happens a lot. But yeah, I mean, it's there, it's there to be used well or not. But yeah, the colors that you can get are a lot more, wow, I don't know, that looks crazy. And then of course, the more you tone down the intensity of your specular and the more you make it white, the more you're gonna end up with normal paint. Like for example, here would have like some sort of black car. It's just a little too dark and a little too grainy on the normal map. But yeah, technically that's how you would go about doing non-metallics. But yeah, clear coat is extremely good. All right, I think we're gonna call it done. I can't stop testing colors. Please, somebody stop me. Wow. Not safe. In any case, thank you everybody for being here today. It's good to see some old faces and some new faces as well. Have a really good day, and I'll talk to you all someday, Monday, whatever. Have a good weekend. Bye bye.
Thank you, Alvin.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank